People don't talk about it much, but it rains a lot in Portland. When rain falls on an industrial site with a lot of disturbed processing areas, it takes contaminants with it over the bank or into a storm sewer system and then through an outfall into the river. There are up to 450 private and public outfalls into the Portland Harbor of many shapes and sizes. These can discharge wastewater as well as stormwater. Discharges from most outfalls are regulated under individual or general permits issued under the Clean Water Act. Compliance with these permits requires treatment and monitoring of the discharges. After being cleaned up, river and bay sediment at some Superfund sites in the Northwest has been recontaminated by uncontrolled stormwater discharges, which makes this an important pathway to pay attention to in order to meet DEQ's source control objectives. DEQ developed a comprehensive approach to ensure that as it continues to rain in Portland, stormwater will not recontaminate Portland Harbor. Recontamination is most likely to happen when stormwater mixes with industrial wastewater and sewage and ends up in the river during combined sewer overflows, commonly called CSOs. In 1991, DEQ ordered the City of Portland to eliminate discharges of stormwater combined with sewage during heavy rains that caused overflows to the Willamette River. Portland completed the project in 2011, becoming one of the first places in the nation to control CSOs. Now, sewage overflows to the river are rare. The striped areas shown here are the CSO basins that drained mostly commercial and residential areas to Portland Harbor back in 1990. Industrial properties are located in narrow strips, shown in gray, adjacent to the river. Not all of these areas discharged through city outfalls, but the industrial areas that did were separated when interceptors were installed in the 1950s. Another important difference between Portland Harbor and other urban Superfund sites is that Forest Park and other open space make up the majority of land use in the basins that drain to the harbor. This means that most of the rain is filtered through forest plants and drains through small streams as it makes its way to the river, and it's really very clean. By the year 2000, discharges from the 4 St. John's CSO basins and 2 Linton CSO basins were controlled. Now, only stormwater discharges here, no more sewage overflows. In 2006, the downtown area and 1 basin across the river were controlled or diverted to the treatment plant. Some stormwater still discharges here, but no more sewage overflows. In 2011, the remainder of the CSO basins were controlled or diverted to the treatment plant. Additionally, about 600 acres of separated stormwater, shown in dotted areas here, were diverted to the CSO tunnels, including 165 acres of industrial area. Since 2003, DEQ has been working with the City of Portland on investigating and controlling stormwater in 39 basins that discharge to Portland Harbor. The city's work included extensive data collection to trace contaminants up the pipes and identify their sources. This information brought a dozen more sites into DEQ's cleanup program for stormwater source control. The city also implemented stormwater control measures and improved programs like the Stormwater Manual, which reduce stormwater discharges and ensure that ongoing stormwater is properly managed at sites throughout the city. Also unique among Superfund sites, in 2009, DEQ published a guidance for evaluating the stormwater pathway at upland sites. Drawn from national stormwater monitoring resources, this guidance shows a simplified chart of the process and offers templates for creating plans to evaluate stormwater and stormwater solids on sites and to trace and control potential contaminant sources. There's also a tool to compare levels of contaminants found in the site's stormwater system to levels found at other industrial sites. DEQ has been working with 170 sites within the Portland Harbor area to evaluate and control stormwater. As you can see by all the colored sites shown on this map, that's a lot of the area. About 100 of these sites have permits to discharge stormwater, which means they must maintain good controls, regularly monitor the discharges, and take corrective actions when contaminants are found at levels above the permit limits. Controlling sources in the stormwater pathway can mean preventing runoff discharges by infiltrating rain that falls in the soils of the site, improving existing treatment mechanisms, or adding additional treatment. For an example of how stormwater is controlled, let's look at the Arkema site. The Arkema site is located about in the middle of the Portland Harbor reach of the Willamette River on the west bank near the railroad bridge. It was operated by a French-owned chemical company manufacturing pesticides, including DDT, from 1947 to 1953. The site has been vacant since 2001, and most of the buildings have been demolished. DEQ began working with the site in 1998 to clean up DDT and other contaminants in the soil, groundwater, and stormwater. Under a voluntary agreement, Arkema pays for all the work and DEQ's oversight time. Soil has been removed, and large portions of the site are now capped. DDT levels in stormwater were higher before the soil removal and capping because rainwater running off the site was exposed to contaminated soil. Just removing soil and paving parts of the site reduced DDT concentrations in stormwater leaving the site. The stormwater pipes were all abandoned, and 2 new channels were dug to convey stormwater from the site to a very large settling basin and then through a very large sand filter, and the water is tested before being discharged to the river under a permit. Concentrations of DDT and other contaminants in stormwater from the site are now very low. In fact, DDT in stormwater was reduced by 99.8%.
There we took some initial stormwater samples, and you can see we had up to 20 micrograms.
When we first realized that the chemicals that were related to the historical productions here had impacted soil, groundwater, the river, we began to take action and start the cleanup process going with DEQ.
It has to be built out, and as we saw,
Period of time from 1947 to 1953, this site had an agricultural chemical aspect to it, so they made pesticides, in particular DDT.
Well, today's a great day to talk about the Arkema stormwater system because it's raining today.
In order to make sure that these dirt particles with the pesticide don't end up in the river, we constructed this stormwater system to remove those dirt particles and the associated DDT.
I think the Arkema stormwater system is a great example of a collaborative approach between DEQ, Arkema, and Portland Harbor partners.
DEQ's been wonderful to work with, been very helpful, they're technically sound.
We've knocked the DDT concentrations down substantially. Right now it's very successful, it's operating as we expected it to, and we're close to our objectives.
We are working hard to control contaminant sources to Portland Harbor so that all the river uses, industry, transit, recreation, subsistence fishing, cultural appreciation, can all continue to coexist.